I'm John Wilson. Now we're here today to talk about chapter 12 in my forthcoming book, The Break of Gage. But before we get on to that, I want to tell you about the picturesque Atlas of Australasia that I've got here in front of me. Now this was produced in 1888 and it contains about 1,000 steel engraving images as well as maps spread across 3 volumes. And I acquired this back in the 1970s. They're very scarce, and the reason they're scarce is that antique dealers were snapping them up and they would tear them apart and take out some of the whole plate images, put them in frames and sell them at dizzy prices in their antique shops. Vandals, I call them. Now I want to tell you about chapter 12. It's called Nuts and Bolts People. And I start chapter 12 by saying that there are 2 sorts of people. There are those who fix things with nuts and bolts, and there are those things that fix them with paper. And if we'd had just a few more nuts and bolts people back in 1897, we wouldn't have a Gage problem in Australia now. It was the one chance we had in Australia to fix the problem and we blew it. The English government sent out Major General Bevan Edwards to do a report on the capacity of the colonies to defend themselves. And it wasn't a very favourable report, and high on his list was the fact that the railway gauges were non-continuous, and this would present a major impediment to the colonies in shifting troops and armaments to defend the country. Now this was taken up by Sir Henry Parkes, who was the Premier of New South Wales at the time, and Parkes was totally in agreement with what Edwards had recommended. And so he set in place a process of conventions and meetings directed towards forming a federation. Now, this attracted many prominent politicians and legal men. These are what I call the people who fix things on paper. And in 1897, they had the convention in Adelaide, and that basically drew up the constitution, or the draft constitution, from which we worked forward. And the railways had served a very important role up until this time, in that the colonies had been connected in the 1880s, first New South Wales and Victoria, then South Australia and Victoria, and finally Queensland. But the railways were then dumped because the people who fixed the things on paper didn't want the railways included in the Federation. That's where I'll leave chapter 12 at the moment, but you can go to the website www.sarlinesbooks.com.au because I've put the whole chapter 12 available for downloading freely on the website, and you can read it all.